"Your wife has abandoned you," the royal secretary announced before the entire opera company. Duke Adrian Ashbourne placed his signet beneath the declaration, though Eleanor stood alive and imprisoned directly beneath the stage. The scrape of his pen travelled through the old speaking pipes as clearly as if he were signing the lie beside her ear. A moment later came the murmur of witnesses, the conductor, the royal chamberlain, Lady Rosalind Vale, and nearly 60 singers and musicians assembled for tomorrow's wedding performance. Eleanor gripped the iron bars of the abandoned rehearsal vault. "Read the final paragraph, Your Grace," the secretary said overhead. Adrian's voice followed, controlled and unmistakable. Her Grace departed voluntarily after evidence was discovered connecting her to the theft of royal performance funds. Her household privileges, accounts, and authority are suspended until she is found. A second pen scratched across the paper. Lady Rosalind was witnessing the declaration. Only hours earlier, Eleanor had entered Adrian's study, carrying a damaged page from the wedding score. 3 measures had been rewritten in a hand that did not belong to the royal composer, and several stage directions had been added in foreign notation. She had asked Adrian to postpone the rehearsal long enough for her to question the musicians. He had barely examined the page. Rosalind's father controlled enough votes in Parliament to secure Adrian the royal appointment he had pursued for 5 years. Any delay to the wedding would offend the Vale family, and Adrian had looked at Eleanor as though her warning were merely another obstacle placed between him and power. "You have mistaken jealousy for danger," he had said. Then, Rosalind's private secretary had produced a purse bearing Eleanor's initials, supposedly recovered from the opera accounts room. Adrian could have summoned the treasurer. He could have compared the initials with the embroidery on Eleanor's other belongings. He could have asked why a woman with access to the household accounts would steal money in a purse marked with her own name. Instead, he had ordered the guards to take her below stage. Now, the declaration erased her before she could defend herself. Eleanor forced her hands away from the bars. Panic would waste the little strength she possessed. Her father, once the most respected voice instructor in London, had taught her that fear tightened the throat before it conquered the mind. She drew one slow breath and listened. Above her, Adrian announced that his marriage to Lady Rosalind would proceed under a special royal license once Eleanor's death or permanent flight had been legally established. The words struck harder than the chain around Eleanor's ankle. Their 11-year marriage had not begun with cruelty. Adrian had once sat beside her at the pianoforte until dawn, composing clumsy melodies simply to make her laugh. During the first winter of their marriage, her benefit concerts had rescued 3 Ashbourne villages after the estate's grain stores burned. Now, he intended to convert her disappearance into permission to replace her. Applause sounded overhead, hesitant from the musicians, confident from the Vales. Then the orchestra began rehearsing the wedding procession. Eleanor turned from the door and examined the vault. Broken scenery leaned against damp stone. Rolled backdrops lay beneath a torn velvet curtain. Near the old scenery lift, 6 barrels stood in a row. 5 bore the opera company's mark in white paint. The 6th had no mark at all. Something silver glinted beside it. Eleanor knelt and reached as far as her chain allowed. Her fingers closed around a broken tuning fork, the kind conductors used to establish pitch. One arm had snapped near the stem, yet the remaining arm could still vibrate. She struck it lightly against the floor. A pure note trembled through the chamber. The 5 marked barrels returned a dull wooden resonance. When she touched the vibrating fork to the unmarked barrel, a sharp metallic hum answered from within. Eleanor froze. The opera stored lamp oil, paint, and small quantities of theatrical powder below stage, but none belonged in a sealed metal container, hidden inside an ordinary barrel. She leaned closer. A bitter mineral odor escaped around the lid. Above her, the orchestra reached the final movement. Eleanor knew every measure. She had helped arrange the procession before Adrian removed her name from the program and gave Rosalind credit for the work. The brass would sound as the king entered. The chorus would rise when the royal party approached the altar. Then, the orchestra would fall silent for 7 seconds, while Adrian and Rosalind exchanged vows. 7 seconds, long enough for a concealed mechanism to move unheard. She looked past the barrels and noticed fresh scratches across the floor. They led toward the scenery lift, which rose directly beneath the center of the royal stage. A heavy object had recently been dragged from the unmarked barrel to the lift, Footsteps sounded in the passage beyond the locked door. Eleanor slipped the tuning fork into her sleeve and moved behind a painted column just as a key entered the lock. Lady Rosalind's secretary stepped inside, carrying a lantern. Another man followed with a coil of copper wire and a wooden box stamped with the crest of the Royal Artillery. "Her Grace," the secretary called softly. Eleanor held her breath. The man placed the box beside the remaining barrels. "She cannot be allowed to hear tomorrow's final rehearsal," he said. "Move her before midnight." "And if Ashbourne asks?" "He will not. The Duke has already signed everything we require." The lantern withdrew. The door closed, and the key turned again. Eleanor waited until their footsteps vanished. Then she looked at the artillery box, the metal hidden inside the barrel, and the scratches leading beneath the royal altar. Adrian had not merely imprisoned her so he could marry another woman. His signature had given the conspirators control of the opera house, and tomorrow the king would walk directly above their weapons. Eleanor studied the artillery box without touching it. If the men returned and found the seal disturbed, they would know she had understood too much. Instead, she knelt beside the scenery lift and examined the fresh scratches. They formed two parallel lines across the stone, then vanished beneath a counterweight frame bolted to the wall. Her chain prevented her from reaching it, but the broken tuning fork did not. She removed it from her sleeve and used its narrow stem to draw the loose end of a discarded rope toward her. After several attempts, the rope caught around the frame. Eleanor pulled until an old sandbag dropped from the rigging with a heavy thud. From somewhere above came a startled cry. "Who is below?" Eleanor recognized the voice. Thomas Bell, a 17-year-old stage apprentice, had once carried music stands for her father and stayed after rehearsals to learn how scenery moved. She hurried to the speaking pipe beside the wall. "Thomas, do not call the guards." Silence followed. "Your Grace? I have been locked inside the lower rehearsal vault. Someone has placed an artillery box beneath the royal stage." A muffled movement sounded above, followed by Thomas's frightened whisper. "They told us you fled with the opera money. Then ask yourself why a woman fleeing London would first chain herself beneath an opera house." The boy said nothing. Eleanor pressed her mouth closer to the pipe. "Can you reach the old prompt room without being seen?" "I think so. Find the blue rehearsal ledger in the cabinet. Do not remove it. Tell me whether yesterday's payment to the chorus bears my signature." Thomas disappeared. Eleanor leaned against the stone and forced herself to wait. She had kept that ledger for 6 years, long before the royal household selected the company for private performances. Her father had taught music, but he had also taught her the machinery surrounding it, the wages that kept singers fed, the contracts that protected young performers, and the acoustics that could turn a whisper into a command across a crowded theatre. After his death, Eleanor had used those lessons to rebuild the failing company. She negotiated subscriptions, arranged benefit concerts, and persuaded wealthy patrons to fund a pension for injured performers. The Royal Wedding Commission had come because the company was disciplined, solvent, and trusted. Adrian had accepted every advantage her work brought him. He had simply stopped admitting that the work was hers. A faint scrape returned through the pipe. "The signature is there," Thomas whispered, "but it does not look like yours." "Describe it." "The first letter is very large. The rest leans backward." Eleanor closed her eyes. Her true signature leaned forward because an old injury made it painful to turn her wrist inward. Adrian knew that. He had watched her struggle to sign correspondence during the winter when she broke her hand in a carriage accident. Yet he had accepted a backward-leaning forgery without questioning it. "Look at the payment amount," she said, "then check the chorus receipt attached to the following page." Paper rustled. "The ledger says £200, Thomas replied. "The receipt says 20. The stolen money had not disappeared after Eleanor's imprisonment. The false entries had begun before she ever found the altered score. "Listen carefully," she said. "Do not accuse anyone. Find Mrs. Finch, the wardrobe mistress. Tell her the silver swallow must remain in its nest." Thomas hesitated. "What does that mean?" "She will understand." The silver swallow was the brooch Eleanor had given Mrs. Finch after the older woman protected 3 young singers from a predatory patron. It was also their private warning that someone powerful was watching. Eleanor had never imagined she would need it inside her own company. "If the guards catch me, then say you were checking the ropes because a sandbag fell. That is true. Can I bring help?" "Not yet. I do not know which doors they control." Footsteps crossed the stage overhead. Thomas fled before Eleanor could say more. She turned back to the chain around her ankle. Its lock was new, but the bolt securing it to the wall had been driven into old mortar. If she could loosen the stone, she might gain enough length to reach the counterweight lever. Escape, however, would not be enough. The declaration Adrian had signed gave Rosalind's secretary authority to describe Eleanor as unstable, criminal, and desperate. If Eleanor appeared before the wedding without proof, the conspirators could have her seized again. She took the broken tuning fork and began scraping mortar from around the bolt. Minutes later, a soft melody descended through the speaking pipe. Mrs. Finch was humming the warm-up exercise Eleanor's father had used with frightened pupils. Eleanor answered with the final notes. "My lady," Mrs. Finch whispered, her voice trembling. "Are you hurt?" "Not badly. Tell me what changed after I was taken." Mr. Harcourt dismissed 2 stage guards and replaced them with men from Lord Vale's household. He ordered the royal altar moved 3 feet toward the centre trapdoor. Mr. Harcourt was Rosalind's private secretary, the man with the lantern. "Has anyone inspected the lower machinery?" "No. Harcourt says the Duke gave him complete authority." There it was again. Adrian's decision had not merely silenced Eleanor. It had removed the loyal workers who might have discovered the weapons. "I need the original wedding score," Eleanor said. "The copy bearing the royal composer's seal." Harcourt locked it in his office. "Then leave it there. Watch who enters. Protect Thomas, and keep the chorus away from the centre stage tomorrow." "What will you do?" Eleanor looked at the crumbling mortar around the bolt. "I will no longer ask my husband to believe me. From this moment forward, I will make the truth survive him." A sharp crack sounded as the bolt shifted. At the same instant, Mrs. Finch drew a sudden breath above. A sharp breath sounded through the pipe. "My lady, there is something else. The purse they claimed had been delivered to the royal secretary is still inside the costume room." Eleanor stopped scraping. "Are you certain it is the same purse?" "It bears your embroidered initials. Harcourt's clerk has just carried it toward the rear carriage entrance. Evidence already submitted to the authorities had no reason to be moved through a private exit." "Do not follow him," Eleanor said. "Remember who carries it and where it goes." Voices entered the costume room. Mrs. Finch's whisper vanished, leaving Eleanor with the certainty that the purse was about to be used against her a second time. Eleanor waited beside the speaking pipe, but Mrs. Finch did not return. The purse was still inside the opera house, despite Harcourt's claim that it had been surrendered as evidence. Wherever his clerk carried it next would reveal what accusation they intended to manufacture. A door opened near Mrs. Finch. Male voices entered the costume room. A door opened near Mrs. Finch. Male voices entered the costume room. "Go," Eleanor whispered. The speaking pipe fell silent. She returned to the loosened bolt. Each scrape of the tuning fork widened the crack in the mortar, but progress was painfully slow. Before she could free it, footsteps approached the vault again. This time, Eleanor did not hide. Harcourt entered with 2 Vale guards. His dark coat was immaculate, and a narrow brass measuring rule protruded from his breast pocket. He glanced at the shifted wall bolt, then at the tuning fork in her hand. "You have been industrious, Your Grace. You have been careless." His expression barely changed. "That confidence becomes less convincing in chains. Does Lord Vale know you are storing military powder beneath the king's feet?" One guard looked sharply toward the unmarked barrels. Harcourt noticed. "They contain materials authorized for the wedding spectacle," he said. "The Duke approved every alteration." "Did he approve the royal artillery seal as well?" The second guard turned toward the wooden box. Harcourt's calm fractured for half a second. That was enough. The guards had been hired to obey, not trusted with the full scheme. He stepped closer to Eleanor. "You heard a rehearsal and frightened yourself. Tomorrow, the court will hear that imprisonment worsened your instability. Tomorrow, the court may hear nothing at all." His hand closed around her wrist. "You will be moved before dawn. If you resist, you will be sedated." "Ah," Eleanor met his gaze. "Then you had better find a physician willing to sign his name beneath the dose." Harcourt released her with a contemptuous smile. He ordered the guards to unfasten the chain from the wall. While one man knelt beside the bolt, Harcourt took the broken tuning fork from Eleanor's hand and dropped it into his pocket. The other guard secured her wrists with rope. They led her into the passage. Eleanor counted every turn. 12 steps to the scenery lift, 9 more to a narrow stair, then left beneath the orchestra pit, where the walls carried sound with remarkable clarity. As they passed an open machinery room, she saw copper wire running through a series of small brass rings toward the center stage trapdoor. Each ring was attached with fresh red thread. The thread was ordinary tailor's silk, yet Eleanor recognized the precise crimson shade. Mrs. Finch used it only to mark costumes reserved for members of the royal family. It could not have entered the machinery room without passing through the wardrobe inventory. That made it traceable. Eleanor stumbled deliberately beside the nearest ring. One guard caught her arm, but her skirt brushed the wall. She pinched off a short piece of the red thread and closed it inside her palm. "Walk," Harcourt ordered. They took her upstairs into a private rehearsal salon. Candles burned beside a polished pianoforte. Lady Rosalind stood near the mirror, while a maid adjusted the pearls at her throat. Adrian waited by the fireplace. For one breath, husband and wife stared at each other. His gaze moved over the ropes binding Eleanor's wrists, then settled on the dirt covering her gown. "What happened below?" he asked Harcourt. "She attempted to damage the stage machinery." "That is a lie," Eleanor said. Adrian's jaw tightened. "You were ordered to remain quiet until I could determine the truth." "You determined it when you signed Rosalind's declaration." Lady Rosalind dismissed her maid with a glance. Once the door closed, she approached Eleanor wearing the pale gold gown intended for the wedding rehearsal. Eleanor recognized the lace at its sleeves. It had been cut from her own presentation gown. "The Duchess's rooms have been sealed," Rosalind said. "Everything inside them now falls under Adrian's authority. Then you should ask his permission before wearing what belonged to me." Rosalind's smile remained soft, but her fingers tightened around the stolen lace. Adrian stepped between them. "Eleanor, tell me plainly, did you remove money from the opera fund?" "No. Your purse was found in the accounts room." "Then show it to me." A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Harcourt answered before Adrian could. "It has been transferred to the royal secretary as evidence." Eleanor watched her husband. "Have you seen it since I was imprisoned?" "No." "Have you seen the ledger?" Harcourt presented the relevant entries. Relevant entries are what liars call fragments. Rosalind inhaled sharply, but Eleanor continued. "The ledger claims I paid the chorus £200. Their receipt records 20. My forged signature leans backward, though you know my injured hand forces mine forward." Adrian looked at Harcourt. For the first time, the secretary's composure required visible effort. "The receipt was clearly altered afterward," Harcourt said, "likely by one of Her Grace's loyal servants." Adrian turned back to Eleanor. "You see, every answer leads to another accusation." "No. Every answer leads to the same man." Harcourt's eyes hardened. Adrian walked toward the window. Beyond it, carriages crowded the street as guests arrived for the evening reception. His royal appointment, his alliance with Lord Vale, and his imagined future all waited on the other side of the glass. He had noticed the contradiction. Eleanor could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders. Yet when he turned, ambition had already defeated doubt. "The wedding preparations will continue," he said. "You will be taken to Ashbourne House and confined to the East Rooms until the authorities examine the accounts." Harcourt's head snapped toward him. He had planned to move Eleanor somewhere else. It was a small victory, but a real one. She had forced Adrian to alter the secretary's arrangement. "No sedatives," Eleanor said. "No Vale guards inside my rooms. If you mean to call this lawful confinement, place your own servants at the doors." Adrian hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed." Harcourt bowed, concealing his anger. As the guards turned Eleanor toward the exit, she let the piece of red thread fall beneath the pianoforte. Mrs. Finch knew every inch of that room. If Eleanor vanished, the thread would tell her which machinery had been altered and who possessed the matching supply. Lady Rosalind watched it fall. Their eyes met in the mirror. Rosalind said nothing until Eleanor had reached the doorway. Then she crossed to the pianoforte, placed her slipper over the thread, and looked at Harcourt. "Change of plan," she said quietly. "The Duchess has begun leaving messages." Rosalind bent and picked up the red thread. "Search her," she ordered. One of the guards caught Eleanor by the shoulder, but Adrian stepped forward. "I gave instructions that my servants would escort her, and she has just attempted to communicate with an accomplice," Rosalind replied. "Must we wait until she succeeds?" Adrian looked from the thread in Rosalind's hand to Eleanor's bound wrists. What message could be carried by a piece of silk? The same sort of message hidden in a musical score, Harcourt said. Her Grace has spent years surrounding herself with performers loyal to her. We cannot know how deeply the conspiracy reaches. Eleanor almost laughed at the neatness of it. Every proof of her competence became evidence of manipulation. Every person who trusted her became an accomplice. The thread came from the machinery room, she said. It binds copper wire to the rings beneath the centre trapdoor. Rosalind held it toward the fire. Then it belongs to the theatre. It belongs to the royal wardrobe inventory. Every length is measured and recorded. The flame caught the silk. Eleanor lunged before she could stop herself, but the guards pulled her back. The crimson thread curled into black ash between Rosalind's fingers. Adrian watched it burn. You could inspect the machinery tonight, Eleanor said. You could ask Mrs. Finch how much thread is missing. Harcourt gave a weary sigh. Or we could continue preparing for the king's arrival, instead of pursuing another theatrical accusation. Adrian's gaze remained on the ashes for a moment too long. Then he ordered the carriage brought around. Rain had begun by the time Eleanor was taken through the rear entrance. 2 Ashbourne footmen sat opposite her, both men she had known for years. Neither met her eyes. Her ropes had been removed, but the accusation travelled beside her more effectively than chains. Halfway to the house, the carriage jolted to a violent stop. A horse screamed outside. The body tilted sharply as one wheel slid toward the gutter. Eleanor caught the leather strap above the door while a footman struck the opposite wall. "Stay inside," the senior footman ordered. Eleanor ignored him and opened the door. The lead horse had stumbled, tangling its harness around one foreleg. The driver pulled desperately at the reins, causing the frightened animal to thrash closer to the iron railing beside the road. "Release the left trace," Eleanor shouted. The driver did not move. "He says you are not to give orders," one footman muttered. "If that horse falls, the carriage will overturn." She stepped into the rain. Years of arranging touring performances had taught her more about overloaded wagons and harnesses than most noble women were expected to know. She seized the buckle, but the wet leather had jammed. "Cut it," she said. No one obeyed. Eleanor pulled a small pin from her hair and worked its sharp end beneath the swollen strap. The horse reared. One hoof struck the carriage, step inches from her hand. At last the buckle released. The animal lurched free, and the carriage settled back onto all 4 wheels. For several seconds, only the rain moved. Then Eleanor saw a young stable boy lying in the street behind the horses. He had been riding on the rear platform and had fallen when the wheel slipped. Blood ran from his temple. "Put him inside." "The Duke ordered us to take only you to the house," the senior footman said. "He is 12 years old. The servant's cart can collect him." Eleanor looked at the boy's pale face and made her decision. "Then I will remain here with him. You may explain to the Duke why his prisoner did not arrive." The footman swore under his breath, but the boy was lifted into the carriage. Eleanor held a folded handkerchief against his wound throughout the journey. By the time they reached Ashbourne House, blood had soaked through the embroidered corner, bearing her initials. Adrian arrived 20 minutes later. Rosalind entered beside him, dry beneath a fur-trimmed cloak. Harcourt followed, carrying Eleanor's marked purse. In the entrance hall, the stable boy's mother knelt beside her son, while the household physician examined him. Relief broke across her face when the doctor announced that the injury was not mortal. Adrian looked at the mud covering Eleanor's gown. What occurred? "The Duchess frightened the horses by attempting to leave the carriage," Harcourt said. Eleanor stared at him. He had not even been present. The senior footman lowered his eyes. Rosalind touched Adrian's sleeve. "She may have intended to escape. Fortunately, your men prevented it." "The lead horse caught its foreleg in the harness," Eleanor said. "I released the trace before the carriage overturned." "Using this?" Harcourt lifted her blood-stained handkerchief from the table. It was found beneath the driver's seat with several gold sovereigns folded inside. The stable boy's mother gasped. Eleanor's pulse slowed. The purse had not been the only object they intended to plant. Rosalind opened it before the assembled servants. Gold spilled across the table beside the blood-stained handkerchief. "The stolen royal money," she said quietly. "She must have carried it from the opera house." Eleanor looked at the footman. They had watched her use that handkerchief to save the boy, yet fear sealed both their mouths. Harcourt turned to Adrian. "Her Grace endangered your servants, attempted escape, and concealed stolen money in your carriage. We can no longer treat this as a private marital matter." The physician rose from beside the injured boy. Your Grace, the child should be moved upstairs. No, Eleanor said. Everyone looked at her. If you accuse me publicly tonight, the boy becomes your witness. Harcourt will claim he helped me hide the gold. Send him home with his mother before you call any magistrate. Unquote. It would remove the one innocent witness who could support her account, but it would also keep a frightened child beyond Harcourt's reach. Adrian's expression changed. For the first time that evening, he seemed to understand that Eleanor was protecting someone at a cost to herself. Let them leave, he ordered. Harcourt protested, but Adrian silenced him. The mother helped her son toward the servants' passage. At the doorway, the boy looked back at Eleanor. I saw the man put the coins there, he whispered. Harcourt went still. Which man? Adrian demanded. The boy raised a trembling finger. Before he could point, a stone shattered the hall window. The candle nearest the boy went out, and an object struck the floor at Adrian's feet, a second purse bearing Eleanor's initials. Inside it lay a written order authorizing the destruction of the Royal Opera House, signed with Eleanor's name. Adrian picked up the document. The ink was still wet. Adrian held the forged order beneath the chandelier. The signature resembled Eleanor's from a distance, but the final stroke leaned backward. The same error appeared again. Eleanor watched recognition enter his face. Give it to me, she said. Harcourt stepped between them. The document must remain untouched until a magistrate arrives. You picked it up from the floor, Eleanor replied. Lady Rosalind handled the other purse. Your concern for untouched evidence has arrived rather late. The stable boy tried to speak, but his mother covered his mouth and drew him toward the servants' passage. Rosalind pointed at the broken window. Someone outside this house is obeying her orders. That alone proves the conspiracy continues. It proves someone threw a purse through a window, Eleanor said. Nothing more. Adrian turned the paper toward the light. Why would anyone forge an order to destroy the opera house? To explain its destruction after it occurs. The entrance hall became silent. Eleanor moved closer to him. The barrels beneath the stage contain metal. An artillery box stands beside them. Copper wire runs to the center trapdoor, and Harcourt has replaced your guards with Lord Vale's men. Inspect the theatre now. If I am lying, you lose one evening. If I am telling the truth, you save the king. For a moment, Adrian looked like the man who had once trusted her judgment before he trusted his own pride. His fingers tightened around the paper. Then Lord Edmund Vale entered through the shattered doorway. Rosalind's father was still dressed for the reception, a crimson sash crossing his formal black coat. Behind him stood a magistrate and 4 armed constables. What has she done now? Lord Vale asked. Adrian did not answer immediately. Eleanor saw the decision approaching before he made it. Lord Vale's political support waited on one side. His disgraced, inconvenient wife stood on the other. She gave him one final chance. Send one servant to the opera house, she said. Not Harcourt, not one of Lord Vale's men. Send someone who answers only to you. Lord Vale's expression hardened. The king arrives at noon tomorrow. If rumours of explosives reach the court tonight, the ceremony will be cancelled, the government embarrassed, and every foreign envoy in London alarmed. If there are explosives, embarrassment is the least of your concerns. There are theatrical materials, he replied. Materials my secretary was authorised to place there. Adrian turned sharply. You knew about the artillery box? For the ceremonial salute, Harcourt arranged it with the stage manager. The stage manager was dismissed this afternoon, Eleanor said. Lord Vale ignored her. He drew Adrian aside, though everyone could still hear his lowered voice. The royal appointment will be announced after the ceremony. Your enemies have waited years to call you indecisive. If you delay the wedding because an accused thief invents a threat, they will destroy you in Parliament. Adrian looked toward the assembled servants. Every face reflected the same question. Would he investigate his wife's warning, or protect the future he believed Rosalind could give him? Harcourt placed a second document on the table. This transfers complete authority over the opera house, its employees, and all wedding preparations to Lord Vale's office until the royal party departs. With your Grace's signature, no one connected to the Duchess can interfere. Eleanor felt the full design reveal itself. Harcourt did not merely want Adrian to ignore the danger. He wanted Adrian's authority to keep honest workers away from it. Do not sign that, she said. Adrian picked up the pen. Mrs. Finch will be barred from the wardrobe rooms, Eleanor continued. Thomas will be removed from the machinery. Your servants will be replaced. When the king arrives, no one who understands that theatre will remain close enough to warn him. Rosalind's voice softened. Adrian, she is using your affection for her to create hesitation. That is why she must be kept away. Eleanor looked at her husband. Is there any affection left to use? Pain crossed his face, quickly buried. He signed. The sound of the pen against paper seemed louder than the shattered glass falling from the window frame. Harcourt sealed the authorization immediately. Eleanor did not plead again. Something inside her had not broken. It had become clear. Saving the marriage was no longer possible. Adrian had been shown contradictions, offered a simple test, and warned of the precise consequence. He had chosen ambition with open eyes. Her purpose changed in that instant. She would protect the performers. She would protect the king. She would protect herself. But she would no longer protect Adrian from what his choice had made possible. The magistrate opened his leather case. Eleanor Ashbourne, he said, you are accused of theft from the royal household, conspiracy to destroy crown property, and attempting to endanger his majesty. Until a formal hearing, you will remain under your husband's custody. Not Newgate? Rosalind asked. Adrian's reply was immediate. No. Lord Vale frowned. That is unwise. She remains at Ashbourne House, Adrian said. The east rooms will be guarded. No one enters without my written permission. It was not mercy. It was control, dressed in gentler clothing. Eleanor held out her hands before the constable could seize them. May I speak privately with my husband? No, Rosalind said. Adrian looked at Eleanor, then at the others. Leave us. Lord Vale objected, but Adrian repeated the order. One by one, they withdrew. Harcourt took both purses and the forged document with him. When the doors closed, Eleanor and Adrian stood alone among the scattered gold. You think I have humiliated you for ambition, he said. You have. I am trying to prevent scandal from consuming everything my family built. No, you are feeding me to it. Adrian's expression tightened. If I inspect the theatre tonight and find nothing, Lord Vale withdraws his support. I lose the royal office. The Ashbourne bill fails, and 3 estates remain buried in debt. You have already lost something greater. His eyes met hers. You were not mistaken about me, Eleanor said. A mistake ends when evidence appears. You saw the forged signature. You heard about the altered receipt. You learned Harcourt had military property beneath the stage. Then you signed because the truth was expensive. He looked away first. A sudden pounding sounded at the front entrance. The doors opened, and an opera messenger stumbled into the hall, his coat streaked with soot. Your Grace, he gasped, addressing Adrian. There has been an explosion during the machinery test. Eleanor's breath stopped. Was anyone hurt? She demanded. The messenger looked at her with terror. Thomas Bell is missing. Mrs. Finch has been arrested for sabotage, and Lord Vale's men have sealed the building under an authorization bearing the Duke's signature. Outside, church bells began striking 10. The royal wedding procession would enter the opera house in 14 hours. Adrian seized the messenger by both shoulders. Where did the explosion occur? Below the west wing of the stage, Your Grace. The blast destroyed the service stairs and injured 3 workmen. And Thomas. No one has seen him since Lord Vale's guards entered the machinery rooms. Eleanor stepped toward the messenger. Was the centre trapdoor damaged? No, Your Grace. The answer confirmed her fear. The explosion had not been an accident or a failed attempt to destroy the building. It had sealed the western passage, driving every worker and guard toward the eastern entrances while leaving the royal altar untouched. Harcourt had created a reason to clear the lower rooms. Now he could complete the real device without witnesses. Adrian snatched a sheet of paper from the writing table and began drafting an order. What are you doing? Eleanor asked. Revoking Harcourt's authority. You transferred control to Lord Vale's office. My signature granted it. My signature can withdraw it. The opera messenger shook his head. Lord Vale has already delivered your authorization to the royal chamberlain. The building is now under crown wedding security. The chamberlain ordered us to obey only Lord Vale until the king departs. Adrian stopped writing. His own ambition had made his command useless inside a theatre bearing his family's name. Then I will go there myself. You will not pass the doors, Eleanor said. Not after an explosion. Harcourt will say your personal involvement compromises the investigation. Adrian's silence admitted that she was right. Lord Vale returned to the hall with Rosalind and the magistrate. He showed no surprise at the messenger's news. "A small charge ignited during a machinery test," he said. "The damage is contained." "3 men are injured," Eleanor replied. "And Mrs. Finch has been identified as the saboteur." Red silk from the royal wardrobe was discovered, tied to the mechanism. Rosalind looked directly at Eleanor. The thread had been turned into evidence against the woman Eleanor trusted. "Where is Mrs. Finch?" Eleanor asked. "In the opera costume room under guard. You placed the accused beside the remaining wardrobe inventory." Lord Vale's eyes narrowed. Eleanor understood then. They had not arrested Mrs. Finch merely to silence her. They intended to make her the owner of every length of incriminating thread, every altered costume, and perhaps the explosive materials themselves. "Release her," Eleanor said. Lord Vale laughed softly. "You are in no position to issue commands." "No," she replied, "but your scheme depends upon everyone believing she acted alone. If she dies in custody tonight, you lose the woman you plan to blame tomorrow." Rosalind's face remained composed, but Harcourt was absent. That frightened Eleanor more than his presence would have. Adrian folded his unsigned revocation. "I am going to the opera house." Lord Vale blocked the doorway. "If you interfere now, the royal appointment is finished. Men were injured under authority bearing my name. And if you create panic before the king's arrival, you will be blamed for far more than injuries. The newspapers will say your wife plotted against the crown, and you helped conceal it." Adrian looked toward Eleanor. She saw the question he could not bring himself to ask. Would she save him from the ruin he had chosen? "I will help the performers," she said. "I will help the workers and anyone else placed in danger. But I will not protect your office, your alliance, or your reputation." Something in Adrian's face collapsed. Before he could answer, a constable entered carrying a sealed royal envelope. "The King's private secretary has issued a summons," he announced. "Duke Ashbourne is required at Carlton House immediately to explain tonight's explosion." Adrian broke the seal. His appointment had been suspended, pending investigation. Until the royal wedding concluded, he was forbidden from entering the opera house or communicating with its staff. The loss was immediate, public, and inseparable from the authority he had given Harcourt. Lord Vale had promised to raise him into government. Instead, Adrian's signature had removed him from the one place where his presence might still matter. The magistrate ordered Eleanor taken upstairs. 2 footmen escorted her to the east rooms, while Adrian departed for Carlton House. The doors were locked behind her, but they were her own rooms, and Harcourt had not yet learned every secret they held. Eleanor crossed to the pianoforte. Her father had designed it with a narrow compartment beneath the lowest keys for storing unfinished compositions. Inside lay blank music paper, sealing wax, and an old brass key to the servants' rehearsal entrance at the opera house. She wrote 3 short lines of music. To anyone else, they formed an incomplete melody. To Thomas and Mrs. Finch, the intervals meant specific stage instructions. Clear the chorus, open the eastern smoke doors, and stop the procession before the final silence. She folded the message and sealed it without a name. Then she rang for her maid. No one came. Eleanor rang again. At last, the stable boy's mother entered, carrying clean linens. She closed the door and bowed. "My son told me what he saw," she whispered. Harcourt's clerk put the coins beneath the driver's seat while the carriage stood outside the opera house. "Will your son repeat that before a magistrate?" "If I can keep him alive long enough." Eleanor handed her the folded music. "Take him out of London tonight. On your way, deliver this to any member of the chorus you trust. Do not enter the opera house yourself." The woman hid the paper inside the linen basket. "What about you?" Eleanor placed the brass key in her sleeve. "I am going back." She opened the window overlooking the kitchen roof. Rain glazed the tiles, and the drop to the lower ledge was nearly 12 feet. Behind her, a key turned in the bedroom door. Eleanor climbed onto the sill just as Rosalind entered. For several seconds, neither woman moved. Rosalind dismissed the guard outside and locked the door again. "You cannot reach the street from that roof," she said. "I only need to reach the servants' stairs." Rosalind approached slowly. "Harcourt has changed the ceremony. The king will no longer stand above the centre trapdoor." Relief flashed through Eleanor, then vanished when she saw Rosalind's expression. "Where will he stand?" "Adrian will take his place." Eleanor stared at her. Rosalind's voice trembled for the first time. "My father promised only the king would die. Harcourt intends to kill them both, and place your forged order beside their bodies." From the city beyond the window came a distant clock, striking 11. Eleanor had 13 hours to prevent a royal assassination, and less than 1 hour before Harcourt discovered Rosalind had warned her. "Why should I believe you?" Eleanor asked. Rosalind looked toward the locked door. "Because Harcourt has ordered my wedding shoes placed beside the bodies. He intends to claim I died with Adrian." The fear in her voice was genuine, but fear did not erase what she had done. "You wore my gown, witnessed the declaration against me, and watched Harcourt forge evidence. I believed my father meant only to remove you. You believed cruelty would remain convenient." Rosalind flinched. Eleanor stepped down from the window. "If you want my help, you will earn it. Tell me where Thomas is." In the old property warehouse behind the Opera House, Harcourt caught him carrying a folded score. "And Mrs. Finch, locked in the royal costume room. Who has the original wedding score?" "My father. He keeps it inside a red dispatch case." Eleanor removed the brass key from her sleeve. "You will unlock this door, order the guard to escort you downstairs, and leave your cloak in the music room. 5 minutes later, you will send him back for it." Rosalind stared at her. "You mean to escape dressed as me?" "I mean to correct one of your many thefts." Minutes later, Eleanor crossed the servants' courtyard beneath Rosalind's fur-trimmed cloak. The guard at the gate saw only a flash of pale gold gown and lowered his head before she passed. She did not go directly to the Opera House. 2 streets away stood the modest music school her father had founded. Adrian had once called it an embarrassment to the Ashbourne name, yet Eleanor had refused to sell it. Its ownership rested in a trust established before her marriage, placing it beyond her husband's control. That neglected building now became her refuge. She entered through the courtyard and found 3 chorus members waiting beside the cold stove. Her coded music had reached them. Mrs. Finch's niece had also brought the blue rehearsal ledger before Lord Vale's guards sealed the company offices. Eleanor spread it across a table. The forged payment appeared on one page, the genuine chorus receipt on the next. More important, the book recorded every person who had withdrawn material from the opera stores. "Red silk," Eleanor said. "Find the wardrobe. Entries." A young singer traced the lines. 6 yards issued to Mr. Harcourt yesterday. He wrote that it was required for decorating the royal box. Eleanor examined the signature. Unlike the forgeries attributed to her, Harcourt's entry matched the hand she had seen on dozens of Vale invitations. "Remove nothing," she said. "Number every page. You will each sign a statement saying when and where the ledger was found. Then we will seal it in the school safe." A knock sounded at the rear door. The chorus members seized fireplace tools, but Eleanor recognized the rhythm. 3 quick beats, 2 slow. Thomas, the young stage apprentice, stumbled inside. His sleeve was torn, and dried blood covered one side of his face. Behind him came the stable boy and his mother, who had found him hiding beneath a delivery cart after he escaped the warehouse. Thomas reached inside his coat and produced a folded score. "I took it from Harcourt's office before they caught me." The royal composer's seal remained intact at the bottom. Eleanor placed the altered copy beside it. The original contained no 7-second silence. Instead, the chorus sang continuously while the king approached the altar. Someone had inserted the silence into every working copy after the composer approved the music. The pause was not ceremonial. It had been created to conceal the sound of the firing mechanism. Thomas pointed to the final page. "I heard Harcourt tell the machinist the wire would be pulled from the royal box. Who occupies it?" "Lord Vale. The father would watch his daughter marry directly above the explosives while controlling the moment of detonation. Either Rosalind was lying, or Lord Vale intended to sacrifice her for something larger than Adrian's appointment." Eleanor folded the original score inside clean paper. Thomas and the 3 singers signed across the seal. The stable boy added his mark as a witness. For the first time, they possessed evidence with a clear path from Harcourt's locked office to independent hands. A carriage stopped outside. Adrian entered the school alone. The room went still. His gaze moved from Thomas's injuries to the chorus ledger, and finally to Eleanor. "You escaped lawful custody. You used the law to imprison the wrong person. I went to Carlton House. The king's secretary refused to cancel the procession without proof." Eleanor placed the 2 scores before him. "Now you have it." Adrian compared the final measures. He did not need Eleanor's musical training to see that one contained the sealed approval and the other contained an unexplained silence. His face lost its colour. "There is more," Thomas said. "Lady Eleanor paid our wages herself last winter when the Ashbourne accounts stopped sending money. She sold her mother's emerald pendant." Adrian looked up sharply. Eleanor had concealed the estate's financial failures because public knowledge would have damaged the performer's contracts. She had never told him how much of her personal allowance had kept the company alive. The young singer opened the ledger to 6 earlier entries. Each payment bore Eleanor's true forward-leaning signature. "You told Parliament the opera company survived because of your patronage," she said. "It survived despite your neglect." Adrian lowered his head. "I was wrong. No. You were warned. I should have listened. You should have investigated. Listening would still have left the choice with you." He reached toward her, then stopped before touching her hand. "What do you need me to do?" "Friend, you will not command anyone in this room. You will not remove the evidence, and you will not speak for me. If we cooperate, it will be under those terms." Adrian nodded. "Agreed." Eleanor gave him the altered copy, keeping the sealed original in the safe. "Take that to Carlton House. Tell the King's secretary exactly when you transferred authority to Lord Vale, what warnings you ignored, and why. That admission will end my appointment." "It should." Pain passed across his face, but he folded the copy into his coat. "I will tell him everything." A crash sounded from the courtyard. Smoke rolled past the rear windows. One of the singers opened the door and recoiled. Flames were climbing the wooden stairs while Vale guards poured oil across the entrance. Harcourt, Rosalind's private secretary, stood beyond the gate. "Bring me the original score," he called, "or the school burns with everyone inside." Behind him, a second guard dragged Rosalind from a carriage with a pistol pressed against her throat. Harcourt smiled toward the window. "And if the Duchess believes her safe contains the only evidence, she should look at the smoke rising from its lock." Smoke poured from the safe's keyhole. Eleanor crossed the room, but Adrian caught her arm. "The iron is already hot. The score is inside, and 6 living people are trapped in this building." His words forced her to stop. Harcourt had constructed the choice carefully: save the evidence or save the witnesses who could explain it. Eleanor turned to the chorus members. "The rear coal window opens into the adjoining yard. Thomas, take them through it." "The opening is too narrow," one singer said. "Remove the frame." They seized a bench and struck the wooden casing until it split. Flames spread across the ceiling while the stable boy's mother wrapped wet curtains around the children. Outside, Harcourt pressed the pistol more firmly against Rosalind's throat. "The score, Your Grace." Eleanor went to the safe. The lock burned her fingers through the edge of her sleeve. She turned the key, pulled open the door, and drew out the sealed score just before the shelves inside collapsed. Adrian stared at it. "If you give him that, we lose the clearest proof. If I do not, Rosalind dies. She helped create this." "Yes, and I decide what I become in answer." Eleanor carried the score into the courtyard. Harcourt's men formed a line beside the burning stairs. Rosalind stood barefoot in the rain, the pearls torn from her throat and blood running from one corner of her mouth. "Release her first," Eleanor said. Harcourt smiled. "You have no authority here. Then you have no reason to fear what I hold." She moved the score toward the nearest flame. His smile vanished. "Wait." He shoved Rosalind forward. She stumbled across the courtyard and collapsed beside Eleanor. "Now the score." Eleanor tossed it onto the wet stones between them. Harcourt's guard retrieved it. Harcourt examined the royal seal, then placed the pages inside the burning doorway. The wax blackened. The paper curled inward until the king's approved music became ash. He had destroyed the document in front of 9 witnesses, but none possessed the authority to stop him. A troop of royal constables entered through the gate. For one hopeful moment, Eleanor believed Adrian's message had reached Carlton House. Then Lord Vale stepped from their carriage. He surveyed the fire, Rosalind on the ground, and Eleanor standing beside the open safe. "There she is," he said. "The Duchess destroyed the school to conceal her conspiracy." The constables surrounded Eleanor. Adrian moved between them. "That accusation is false." Lord Vale held up the authorization Adrian had signed. "Your Grace surrendered authority over this investigation. You have also been suspended from royal service." "I signed that order after ignoring evidence of forgery and explosives." The admission silenced the courtyard. Lord Vale's expression sharpened. "Consider what you are saying. I have considered too little until now. Adrian faced the constables. My wife warned me repeatedly. I chose not to investigate because Lord Vale threatened my appointment and political alliance. I signed the transfer, knowing there were unresolved contradictions. Every action Harcourt took inside the opera house afterward was made possible by my cowardice. The captain of the constables removed his hat. Your Grace, that statement may be treated as an admission of negligence toward the crown. It should be. Eleanor saw the cost land upon him. Adrian had surrendered the defence that might have preserved his office and standing, yet his truth did not free her. Lord Vale ordered the constables to arrest them both. Rosalind stepped forward. My father knew about the weapons. Vale struck her across the face before she completed the sentence. The constable captain seized his wrist, but Harcourt spoke over the commotion. Lady Rosalind has been distressed since learning of the Duchess's crimes. Her statement cannot be trusted. By dawn, Eleanor and Adrian were confined in separate rooms at Carlton House. Thomas and the chorus members were detained as suspected accomplices. Mrs. Finch remained imprisoned inside the opera house, and the stable boy had disappeared with his mother before the constables recorded their names. The original score was gone. The blue rehearsal ledger had burned inside the safe. Lord Vale presented the forged destruction order, the 2 purses, the stolen sovereigns, and the red silk found beneath the stage. Before an emergency royal council, Harcourt described Eleanor as a jealous wife who intended to destroy the king's wedding rather than allow Adrian to marry Rosalind. His account was calm, complete, and supported by physical evidence he had manufactured. The council ordered the wedding procession to proceed under increased guard. Cancelling it, Lord Vale argued, would reward the conspiracy and signal royal weakness. Eleanor was brought into the chamber shortly after sunrise. The king's secretary sat at the head of the table. Can you produce the approved score? No. The financial ledger? No. Can any independent witness prove that weapons remain beneath the stage? Eleanor looked toward Thomas and Mrs. Finch. Both were her loyal associates. Rosalind was Lord Vale's daughter. Adrian was her husband. Every witness could be dismissed as biased or compromised. No, she said. Then, until after the ceremony, you will remain confined. The guards led her away. As Eleanor passed Harcourt, something silver protruded from his coat pocket. The broken tuning fork. He had kept it since taking it from her in the underground passage. A stagehand's tuning fork bore the opera's inventory number at the base. If Harcourt claimed he had never entered the lower vault before the explosion, possession of that object would contradict him, but only if he could be forced to display it publicly. Then Eleanor saw Harcourt's fatal mistake. He claimed he had never entered the lower vault, yet he possessed her broken tuning fork. More importantly, only the person who built the device would know which note made the hidden metal answer. At the doorway, Eleanor stopped. I request permission to sing at the ceremony. Laughter moved around the council table. Lord Vale stared at her. Why? Because you told the court I used music to organize a conspiracy. Let the court hear the music and judge whether I can communicate with anyone inside the theatre. Harcourt's hand closed protectively over his pocket. Eleanor saw fear enter his eyes. The king's secretary considered her request. If you attempt a warning, signal, or deviation from the approved arrangement, the guards will arrest every member of the chorus. I understand. She bowed, but Eleanor did not intend to warn the audience. She intended to reproduce the hidden barrel's exact pitch in the middle of the wedding music and force Harcourt to reveal that he knew what would answer. At 11:30, Eleanor entered the opera house beneath armed escort. Every chandelier burned above a hall, crowded with ministers, ambassadors, and members of the royal household. Lord Vale had transformed the wedding into a display of control. More guards lined the aisles, yet nearly all wore his family's colours beneath their royal sashes. The chorus waited behind the curtain. Before joining them, Eleanor gave the constable captain 3 instructions. Move the youngest singers to the upper gallery, keep the centre aisle empty, and when the orchestra reaches the final movement, watch Harcourt, not me. Why should I trust you? You should not. Watch everyone. That answer satisfied him more than a plea would have. Mrs. Finch had been released only long enough to dress the chorus. As she adjusted Eleanor's plain white singing gown, her fingers pressed something small into Eleanor's palm. A brass measuring rule. I found it beneath the royal altar, she whispered. Harcourt used it when the wires were placed. Eleanor recognized the narrow rule she had seen protruding from his coat during her first confinement. One edge was stained with black powder, the other carried a shallow cut at exactly 7 inches. "Who saw you find it?" "Thomas and the constable outside the costume room." "Give it to the constable. Do not let it remain in either of our hands." Mrs. Finch obeyed. The chain of possession was fragile, but it was no longer private. Trumpets announced the royal party. King George entered through the centre doors, while the orchestra played the approved procession reconstructed from the composer's surviving notes. Adrian followed under guard, not as a bridegroom, but as a duke summoned to answer before the crown. Rosalind walked behind him in a dark blue gown. The gold wedding dress had been taken as evidence. Lord Vale occupied the royal box. Harcourt stood beside the stage curtain, one hand resting near his coat pocket. Before the ceremony could begin, Lord Vale rose. "Your Majesty, the woman permitted to sing before you is not merely accused of theft. She is the architect of the violence committed inside this house." Murmurs spread through the audience. He displayed the forged destruction order and Eleanor's marked purse. "She arranged the first explosion, corrupted members of the company, and now asks to perform because music is how she signals her accomplices." The king's secretary turned to Eleanor. "Do you deny it?" "I do, but I ask that Lord Vale finish." Vale hesitated. "A liar should be allowed to complete his story before the truth interrupts it," Eleanor said. Anger coloured his face. He described the sovereigns found in the carriage, the red thread beneath the stage, and the false payment entries bearing Eleanor's name. Each piece appeared convincing when isolated from the hands that had moved it. When he finished, Eleanor faced the audience. "The purse was supposedly recovered after I fled, yet Mrs. Finch saw Harcourt's clerk refill it while I remained chained below stage. The payment ledger claimed I gave the chorus £200, while their signed receipt recorded 20. The forged signature leaned backward. Every verified signature I wrote after my carriage injury leans forward." Harcourt stepped from the curtain. The ledger and receipt were destroyed in a fire she arranged. "But you described the ledger's contents before the fire," Eleanor said. "How did you know which entry I would challenge?" He stopped. "You showed the Duke only selected pages," she continued. "Pages you claimed proved my guilt. You therefore admit you possessed the ledger before it burned. That proves nothing beyond proper investigation. Then let us consider the stage." Mrs. Finch and Thomas were brought forward under guard. The constable captain produced the brass rule in a cloth. Eleanor did not touch it. "Mr. Harcourt carried that rule on the night I was first imprisoned. 3 witnesses saw it recovered beneath the royal altar this morning. The black residue matches the powder stored below stage, and the cut at 7 inches corresponds to the spacing of the copper firing rings." Harcourt laughed. "A common rule and common powder. Then explain why a private secretary carried either into an opera house." "I supervised stage alterations, under authority granted after the alterations began." The audience stirred again. Eleanor turned toward Adrian. "When did you sign the transfer of control?" 10 o'clock last night, he answered. "When did Harcourt dismiss the original stage guards?" "Before 5 yesterday afternoon," Thomas said. "When did the copper wire first appear?" "Before Her Grace was taken from the lower vault," Mrs. Finch replied. Adrian looked toward the king. "I signed after my wife warned me the machinery had already been altered. Harcourt acted before possessing the authority he now uses as his defence. He authenticated his failure, nothing more." The decisive reasoning remained Eleanor's. Lord Vale struck the rail of the royal box. "This is performance, not proof. Where are the weapons she claims exist?" Eleanor faced the conductor. "Begin the final movement." The orchestra played. Her voice rose above it, clear, controlled, and seemingly faithful to the wedding arrangement. She sang the first phrase, then the second. As the melody approached the 7-second silence inserted into the altered copies, Harcourt's attention shifted toward the royal box. Lord Vale's hand moved beneath the rail. Eleanor did not stop singing. Instead, she sustained a single note, the exact pitch the broken tuning fork had drawn from the hidden metal barrel. Beneath the stage, something vibrated. A deep metallic hum travelled through the floor. Guests rose in alarm. The constable captain ordered the royal party away from the altar. Harcourt reached inside his coat and pulled out the broken tuning fork. "Stop that note," he shouted. "You will trigger the lower charge." The orchestra fell silent. Eleanor ended the tone. No one moved. She looked at the tuning fork in Harcourt's hand. You told the council you had never entered the lower vault before the first explosion. Harcourt's face became grey. Yet you know this broken fork, this pitch, and what lies beneath us. Lord Vale leaned over the royal box. She told him, that proves they conspired together. No, Eleanor said. He took the fork from me before I knew how the device worked. Its inventory number can establish where it belonged. The powder embedded in its broken edge can establish what he struck with it afterward. The constable captain approached Harcourt. Then a ticking sound began beneath the stage. Not 7 seconds. Far longer. Thomas looked toward the machinery floor. That is not the firing wire, he whispered. It is the scenery clock. Eleanor saw Lord Vale retreat from the royal box. The barrel had not been designed to explode during silence. The silence had been designed to conceal the lowering of something else. She turned toward the center trapdoor as its wooden panels began to separate. Beneath them, hidden below the royal altar, a sealed iron compartment slowly rose into view. On its lid were 2 crests, Lord Vale's family arms and the mark of the royal artillery. The king's secretary stared at Lord Vale. Open it. The constable captain inserted the key taken from Harcourt. The lock turned, and as the lid began to rise, Eleanor understood that the contents would reveal not merely how the assassination was meant to occur, but who Lord Vale intended to blame for the king's murder. The lid opened. Inside the iron compartment lay 12 artillery charges packed around a clockwork firing device. Beneath them were bundles of foreign political pamphlets, a blood-stained cloak embroidered with Eleanor's initials, and dozens of letters written in an imitation of her hand. The king's secretary lifted one letter with gloved fingers. It instructed unnamed revolutionaries to enter the opera house through the servants' rehearsal door, and the door opened by the brass key that had been taken from Eleanor's rooms after her arrest. Another letter promised payment, with sovereigns stolen from the royal household. The same coins had been placed in her purse and Adrian's carriage. Lord Vale backed away from the royal box. That compartment bears the royal artillery mark. I had no control over military stores. But it also bears your crest, Eleanor said. A man committing treason would remove his own name. A man planning to blame someone else might leave it because he expected the compartment to be destroyed. Harcourt tried to reach the wings. The constable captain blocked him. Eleanor approached the open compartment, but did not touch its contents. The first explosion destroyed the western stairs and cleared the lower passages. Mrs. Finch was arrested, so the red silk could be attributed to her. Thomas was taken because he possessed the approved score. The altered music created enough silence to raise this compartment beneath the altar without the audience hearing the machinery. She looked toward Lord Vale. The king, Adrian, and Rosalind would have died together. My forged order, cloak, letters, and stolen sovereigns would have survived in a protected iron box. Lord Vale would emerge as the grieving father who had warned everyone about his daughter's dangerous rival. Rosalind stared at her father. You meant me to die. Vale gripped the rail. You were to leave the stage before the final blessing. No, Eleanor said. Harcourt moved the firing point after Rosalind warned me. He told her Adrian would replace the king above the trapdoor, but that was another lie. The charges were large enough to destroy the royal box, stage, and first rows together. The constable captain examined the device. A copper wire ran from its release lever toward Lord Vale's seat. The constable captain pushed the brass rule into the device. Its cut caught the clockwork tooth perfectly. This was not used to measure the stage, he said. It was made to arm the charge. Mrs. Finch's red silk still bound the final firing ring. Harcourt suddenly raised the broken tuning fork like a blade and struck at the captain. Thomas pulled the curtain rope beside him. A heavy velvet drape dropped across Harcourt's shoulders, and 3 constables forced him to the floor. The tuning fork skidded to Eleanor's feet. She did not pick it up. The inventory number, at its base, was plainly visible to everyone. Lord Vale shouted that Harcourt had acted alone. Harcourt laughed from beneath the constable's hands. You designed the compartment. You ordered the royal gold. You promised me the Home Office after the king was dead. It was not his confession that condemned Vale. The objects already had. The wire led to his box. His crest marked the iron. His own signed requisition for ceremonial artillery matched the serial numbers on the charges. The forged letters contained private information taken from documents kept in his London office. The king rose. "Remove them." Lord Vale and Harcourt were arrested for conspiracy against the crown, attempted murder, forgery, unlawful imprisonment, arson, and theft. Their property was seized pending trial, and every official appointment controlled by the Vale family was suspended. Rosalind was placed under guarded residence. She admitted witnessing the false declaration, concealing evidence, burning the red thread, and helping Harcourt imprison Eleanor. Her warning and testimony spared her the gravest charge, but not accountability. She lost the marriage, her place at court, and the fortune her father had promised her. Then Adrian walked onto the stage. No guard compelled him. He faced the king, the musicians, the servants, and the same nobles who had heard him declare his wife a thief. "My signature made this possible," he said. "Eleanor brought me the altered score. I refused to examine it. She showed me the forged signature, the false ledger entry, and the military property beneath this stage. I chose Lord Vale's support because I valued office above truth." His voice roughened, but he continued. "I confined my lawful wife, surrendered her authority to those accusing her, permitted another woman to take her possessions, and publicly damaged the name she had spent years using to protect this company. No deception forced those choices upon me." He surrendered his royal appointment before the king could formally remove him. He also renounced his control of the opera house and transferred his unentailed share into an independent trust for the performers. The income Eleanor had spent supporting the company was restored from his private property, together with funds to rebuild her music school and compensate every worker injured in the explosion and fire. The forged accusations against Eleanor and Mrs. Finch were publicly withdrawn. Her accounts were reopened. Her personal allowance was placed under independent trustees, and the king granted her authority to direct the rebuilt Royal Opera Company without Adrian's interference. Weeks later, Adrian met Eleanor on the empty stage. The damaged altar was gone. Sunlight entered through open doors where Vale guards had once stood. "I have instructed my solicitor to agree to separate maintenance and residence," Adrian said. "Ashbourne House will remain available to you if you want it." "I do not." "The music school, then?" "It was always mine." He accepted the correction. "I will not ask you to forgive me." "Good. I loved you once." Eleanor looked at the man who had composed melodies for her and later signed away her life without reading the warnings she placed before him. "Perhaps you did. But when love became expensive, you chose ambition. I cannot build my future upon the hope that you will choose differently next time." Adrian lowered his head. "I understand." "No," she said gently. "You are beginning to." He left through the audience entrance, alone. That evening, the company gathered for its first rehearsal under Eleanor's direction. Thomas stood beside the restored machinery. Mrs. Finch placed the silver swallow brooch at her collar. The stable boy and his mother watched safely from the front row. On a table at centre stage lay the formal deed establishing the performer's trust. At the beginning of the story, Adrian had signed a declaration above Eleanor's prison and erased her name while she listened from below. Now Eleanor signed her own name in full view of everyone. The final stroke leaned forward. She closed the ink bottle, lifted the conductor's baton, and gave the signal. Every door in the opera house remained open as her music began.